Everybody, keep your spine erect, eyes gently closed. Shift your eye gaze to the third eye, to the Jyotishmati, the light of awareness within. Take a deep breath and exhale. One more deep breath with Ujjayi. Let's begin today's session with the opening chant. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And let's offer our salutations to Sage Patanjali. Yogena chittasya padena vacha malam shariram cha vaidyakena vyopakarotam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmin. Good evening, everybody. Let's continue with our Yoga Sutra and Bhagavad Gita study. Last Saturday, we started talking about Dharma, the 360-degree view of the Dharma, as it's covered in some of the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Manusmriti, and different texts. Today, we're going to continue the study of the Dharma and start looking into the different dharmas that we could inculcate or we could practice in our way of life. Before I begin, any thoughts or comments? Does anybody have any thoughts or comments to share? Or any reflections from last week? Sunilji?
Yes, Ji. Nothing specific, Ji. Nothing specific to add.
I see. So let me share my screen. Okay, so let's continue the study of the Bhagavad Gita. And let's chant the Dhyana Sloka. Pardaya pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grahitam Purana Muninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshini Bhagavatim Astadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadami BhagavadGita Bhavadveshinim BhagavadGita Bhavadveshinim. So Bhagavad Gita, one of the essence that we covered last week is in the first sloka, there was a question that was posed by Dhritarashtra. It's about Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Kimakurvata Sanjaya. In the battlefield of life or in the battlefield of the body, the two kshetras that we are involved in, what did the Mamaka, my sons, and the other soldiers and Pandavas and other soldiers, what did they do? And for that, what we covered last week is we actually learned a profound lesson, which is that Kshetre Dharma Kuru. In whatever the situation that you present yourself, wherever you are, you, that being the self, wherever you are, always perform dharma, act according to the dharma. That was what we covered last time. And for that, what are the questions? The key questions that we always present, we always find ourselves in every field is, number one, who am I? And this is perhaps in one of the workshops that we do. I would want all of us to kind of ponder deeply about who am I? And how do we define ourselves? What is our identity? And that is something that we can ponder so deeply on. And Patanjali Yoga Sutras, what Patanjali defined our identity as is Nitya Suchisuka Atma. And how do we connect to that source, that realization? Who am I? And that's what Bhagavan Sri Krishna also says. It's not your body, it's not the Shriram. It's the Pura. Pura is the body, the Shriram. But it's the Purusha, the one that's residing within the Pura is the who am I, the Kshetrajna, the self, the Nitya Suchisuka Atma, the Purusha or the Drashtu is who am I. Unlike other scriptures who always, very much focused on identifying who am I, Bhagavad Gita actually thinks that, that's only 50% of the situation that we need to comprehend. The second one is, where am I? To have that Sankhya, the perception of the field that is around us. One is the body is a field, and also the Prakriti that's around us is also something that we need to have complete understanding of. And then the next question is, why am I here where I am? And that's where, Bhagavad Gita also offers a clarity on why am I here where I am? And then what do I intend to do about that? And then knowing that in that situation of who am I, where am I, and then why I got here, and then how do you deal with that situation? And then that's where we found the answer as Kshetre Kuru Dharma. Wherever you are, always act according to the Dharma. And one of the things that Bhagavad Gita in the last verse that Paul said is inner peace, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna. Wherever there is that harmony of the Yogeshwara, inner peace, the tranquil mind is established. And then in the tranquil mind, Chitta Vritti Nirodha, that's where Yatra Pardo Dhanudaraha, that's when you are exhibiting the outer dynamism like an Arjuna. That's when Tatra Shri Vijayo Bodhihi, that's when the Vijayam, the Samyama, the excellence is going to be realized. And that's a small acronym for that, IPAD. Inner peace and outer dynamism is the way of life to realize Samyama. Otherwise, what happens is, we talked about this in Patanjali Yoga Sutras. When the mind is engaged in a lot of trivial thoughts, it's called Shudra Buddhi. What happens is mind is the source of energy within us. What happens is we actually dissipate all this energy by engaging in a lot of trivial and mundane thoughts, pursuing small pursuits, driven by that sensory pleasures, the indriyas, and driven by mamaka, this selfish me, mine, and mine. And we dissipate all our energy, the source of really the Purusha energy within us, because the mind actually dilutes the entire power, dissipates all the precious energy. And then, but when you establish a mind in tranquil mode, not get carried away by either selfish desires or driven by the sensory pleasures, and that's when you literally have the energy like a sun that's residing in it, and then you engage in one object of pursuit that is of importance to you, that is to see the divine around us, and that's when we actually become the divine. That's when the Samyama is going to realize. And I think we talked about that. Samyama is a combination of Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. When you simultaneously engage your mind in one thought that is of the Brahman, Brahmacharati iti Brahmacharya, something of the higher value, that's when we actually become successful. Now,
Sriniji,
yeah, go ahead.
From the previous slide, once you know who am I, where am I, and what am I supposed to do, isn't it irrelevant?
The question is, when you do the who am I says that yourself, but we are in this we have this manifestation in this body and the situation. We are in the world performing. We have a place in the society right now. So now that you know that you are the self, but what do I do with it? By being the self, there are certain people who actually go pursue that. In other words, they go to the caves and the mountain, and then they try to engage in that self-realization, and then they choose to remain silent in their own thing. But for those of us who are engaged in this worldly, in this, the external world, and we see that as one of the dharma, that you have the people that are engaged in this regular world, for them, the where am I is important, and then they need to see a purpose in their being in this regular world. Did that answer?
Yeah. I mean, because I was thinking like Ramana, once he got to know who am I, it didn't, where he was, what his purpose didn't matter. Things came to him and things happened. Like, I mean, everything aligns once he had the complete self-realization. I guess you're telling like common people who can't do those things.
Yeah, I think there are different people. Like, even Buddha had the same dilemma actually. After he got the enlightenment, we covered about, we talked about this in one of our previous sessions. After his enlightenment, he chose to remain silent. He had a smile and he chose to remain silent.
True.
And that's when the angels came to him. It says like, now, no, you have to go spread this knowledge. So that, and then Buddha's response was, those who know it, they will get it. Those who know it, they will always get it. And those who don't know it, they're not going to get it. In fact, in the Sanskrit, there is something that basically says, praptasya prapti nivrittasya nivrittihi. You only get what you already got. You only lose what you've already lost. That is one of a famous saying. But the thing is, the deeper meaning of that is all of us are going to realize that self at some point. And whatever the things that you're going to lose is the things that you already lost. By being the self, you're going to lose your ego, you're going to lose your possessions and all that stuff. It's just that you may choose to engage in this playground for some more time. That's by choice. I think what Vivekananda took a position, Shankara took a position, Buddha took a position, where they realized that they really wanted to go take an active way, where they wanted to go help others to get closer to this realization. Some of the other people, like, we find so many of these saints where they just choose to remain silent, right? They choose to remain silent, like Ramana did. And then those need that, they went to him and then they got their questions answered. So there are choices. In fact, Vivekananda, one of his talks, he basically says that one of the saints actually reached to him and is like, I want to go after this moksha, that self-realization. And then Vivekananda had a point of view. His point of view was, when you have this many people around you who are going through all kinds of suffering, don't you see it your responsibility to actually go address this? I mean, look at Buddha. He looked at, he didn't have any suffering. He actually saw the suffering of an old man, a sick man, and a dead man. And then he basically is like, let me go find a solution for this. Right? And then, but after he realized that enlightenment, he again wanted to remain silent, but then the angels asked him to go take to his calling. And that's when he started going around and helping so many. In fact, I'm sure many of you read the life story of Buddha. And there was something that was very profound. Apparently, many of the kings, those used to go to him and says like, okay, please, show us some path. And the first thing that he would do is he would actually give all these royal kings a begging bowl and says like, go fetch. And that was the first process to conquer your ahankara, the ego. So these are different techniques. And then he came up with Dhammapada and helped so many. In fact, many of us, still, like core values of the Buddhism. And of course, Advaita takes it one level further than Buddha. Buddha is one kind of scientific method, but our Advaita and the Sanathana Dharma has infinite ways to realize the infinite. So, sorry, did that clarify the stuff for you, Savita, to some extent?
Yeah, to some extent, but I feel by saying let's not go with the path of Ramana, let's not go, but understand yourself. I mean, know yourself, sorry, and but also know your surrounding. The minute I engage with my surrounding, which is Maya, anyways, don't I also start engaging like what am I trying to change in that Maya? Maya is Maya, like
No.
Like, what am I?
Maya is actually, so let's no, Maya is Maya. But the thing is, there are many around you, they do not know that they are in the Maya. And the suffering in this physical costume is actually real around us. And the thing here is the Ishvara, and we're going to see actually in some of the verses, some of the dharmas, what it actually says is, how do you, just like how you can see the divinity within us, how can you also see the divinity all around us to realize that oneness? And there are some people, we have looked at some of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. There are some people around you who are actually going through struggles. And there are some people that are actually doing bad deeds, who are actually distorted from that self. And that's when it says, like, we are all one. So it is like, when you are anchored and the people around you are not reposed in the self, what yoga philosophy, Advaita philosophy also says is, like, how do we all get to that sense of oneness? I mean, that's a part of action. And again, I'm not saying that, Ramana, I mean, I have great admiration and reverence for Ramanaji, but I have a personal, what I, equate to is a path of Vivekananda, Shankara, or Buddha, who actually take it upon themselves to also bring divinity in all around. So it is more of an active versus semi-active, I think. So with that, let's actually move on to the other things. So there are so many different dharmas, actually. Dharma is almost like it's more like a governing body. What is the right code of conduct in every situation? Like, for example, if you work for a company, then there is a dharma for that, right? Then the articles of corporation, and then there are some core values and all that kind of stuff. But there are some dharmas that we would want to spend some time. Number one is there is a thing called Svadharama. What is the dharma of the self? How do you conduct yourself? And then there's also things like, Kula Dharma, Dharma of the family, which is like, how do you engage within your own community? Like, things of honesty, integrity, love, and compassion. And then there is a thing like Manav Dharma. There is like, Dharma as a human, Dharma as, every species has a Dharma. And then there is Sanatana Dharma, that is eternal. And in fact, in the Sanathana Dharma, we're going to look at some of the elements of Sanatana Dharma. And the Sarma it's actually time immemorial. It transcends the time, transcends the location. Does anybody would want to kind of quote any of the quote the Yoga Sutra that Patanjali defined? That is something similar to Sanatana Dharma. These values are eternal. Does anybody? So Patanjali defines after the Yama principles. He basically says that these are eternal dharmas, like, the ahimsa satyasteya brahmacharya parigraha. And then he also anchors it with, follows it with sutra, jati deshakala samayana vichinna sarvabhauma mahavratam. These are eternal vows. This is like, Sanatana Dharma. And then Raja Dharma, Dharma of governance in some bodies. Yuga Dharma, there was Dharma that actually, spans different times and different eras. Like, for example, what happened in the 1900s to 2000, and what happened before the scientific revolution happened versus what happened before. I mean, there were sometimes people thought that, some people in some parts thought that sun is roaming around earth, and then they were actually trying to organize everything based on that. So but there is actually in our scriptures, there is also the yugas, the 4 yugas, and then there are different dharmas that are at play in different times. And then the last 2, Pravritti Dharma, Nivritti Dharma, and I think this applies to many of us. Pravritti Dharma is, how do we conduct ourselves in the external world? And Bahiranga Sadhana, how do we deal with the physical world around us? And Nivritti Dharma, which is like, how do we go inwards in your spiritual journey, the inward journey? There are 2 different dharmas. Until Bhagavad Gita came, almost all scriptures focused on either Pravritti Dharma or Nivritti Dharma. They either covered that or the Nivritti Dharma. Bhagavad Gita is perhaps the first scripture that actually covered the both Pravritti Dharma and the Nivritti Dharma. In other words, we're actually going to see how can you anchor yourself in the self, make progress in your spiritual and the self-realization by conducting yourself in the regular world. And that is one of the core essences, the greatest contributions of Bhagavad Gita. So now let's look at Sanathana Dharma. I think all of us, know there is one beautiful verse from Sanathana Dharma, and I think many of us have seen this. One of the values of the Sanathana Dharma, it basically is anchors on. It's founded on Satyam Bruyat, Priyam Bruyat, Na Bruyat Satyam Apriyam, Priyam Anritam Na Bruyat, Esha Dharma Sanatanaha. The Sanatana Dharma, we being the followers of Sanatana Dharma, the first and uncompromised, non-negotiable, the principle that we all have to adhere to is the truth. But Sanatana Dharma, in fact, even talks about how to conduct yourself in the truth, manasa vacha karmana. Always the truth needs to be, you need to anchor, you need to speak truth in a loving way. Speak what is loving and the truth. Because the truth needs to be anchored in love, compassion, anahata chakra. Because ultimately, we're all about spreading love. Love is divine. Love is truth. Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat. Na bruyat, satyam apriyam. This is something that we sometimes struggle with. Sometimes when we want to say the truth, but it comes across in a harsh way. The people that are practicing Sanatana Dharma, what it actually says, when you are speaking the truth, make sure that you are gentle, anchor in a compassion, not in a punitive way. Don't say the truth in an apriyam way. Right? It is like, what it actually goes into, like, disciplinary measures. Sometimes, we all take pride in, like, hey, I am doing it for the benefit of the others, for the right truth. But our means are also very important in the Sanatana Dharma. Right? And then the next one is very important. Don't speak a lie in a loving way. In fact, that's probably the biggest flaw that we could actually exhibit as a violation of Sanatana Dharma. And this is what is Sanatana Dharma, one of the founding principles of Sanatana Dharma, that we are all nothing but the descendants of Sanatana Dharma and the followers. It's all about truth and being truthful. And the truth is accompanied by love, Priya. Is Priyaji here?
No, I don't see her.
I see. So that's a very, very profound. Have you looked at this? I'm sure all of us have looked at it. Any thoughts or reflections on this about truth and being gentle and love coexisting?
Yeah, so
Truth
we
and
have
gentleness. Yeah.
Please go.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the Vachika Tapas, right? So it does, I think, in the 17th chapter, I think, or I'm forgetting it, maybe 18th, where he comes into, and Bhagavan talks about Vachika Tapas, basically. Satyam. I'll bring it up, but yeah, that's what I remember. And also, I missed your earlier slides, Srinji. We will revisit them. I'm not sure if you covered a lot.
No, there was not much. I was just covering the different types of dharma, and then we are starting looking at different dimensions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw the first slide, types of dharma. Yeah,
and then we were kind of going through
I'll pull that slide as well. I think I put that on my I combined three things there on my blog, which is one is this shloka, and then combined that with the Vachika Tapas shloka, and then combined that with the compassionate communication by Marshall Goldberg or something like that. So he talks about the OFNR principle. How do you deliver words in a safe way, whether it at work, with the spouse, or most angriest possible emotion converted into a safe giraffe way of talking versus a jackal way of talking. We'll catch up.
Oh, the 5 chairs. The 5 chairs.
5 chairs.
Jackal, whale, and
There is a
really? ऐसा भी है क्या? मुझे नहीं मालूम. This is.
There are 4 types of parenting actually. There's dolphin, there's kangaroo, and this and this.
dolphin.
Let's actually.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that one. This is new to me.
Meerkat.
Oh, this is parenting styles basically.
Yeah, there are 4 types of parenting styles: dolphin, giraffe, kangaroo, and then there is one more, which is also kind of a rhino. There is a rhino.
Sure. I'll pause that because I know I don't want to disturb the current flow. Yeah. But I think I'll note it down for a later time. Yeah.
I think this is the most important thing, because we being the descendants of Sanathana Dharma, in fact, Sanathana Dharma is eternal. It actually applies to every being. The first and foremost is about truth, and truth always being steadfast about our seeking of the truth, but also do it in a very gentler and a loving way. What we should never do it is package untruth in a loving costume, because that doesn't serve anyone. That's when we are going to further away, move away from ourselves. Right? That is what is the Sanatana Dharma. And then when I started looking at, and of course, I've always been a big admirer of Mahatma Gandhi and his experiments with truth, and his Satyagraha, and of late only recently I got even more deeper understanding of Satyagraha from one of the talks from Sarvapriyanandaji. And what it literally says, his Dharma, Gandhi anchored in the Dharma of truth and non-violence, because napriyam, the truth can always have to be priyam. And he basically says, like, I'm anchored in Satyagraha is Satya, but Satya can only be realized with, in its fully, in a non-violent way, with ahimsa. That is his Dharma. And there are a bunch of quotes that we basically says, like, Satyagraha is constant search of truth, and God is truth, that one is the truth. And he also says in a Satyagraha is that constant prosecution of the truth in all the different kshetras. For sometimes, the other people, outsiders, Gandhiji looked as inconsistent. He found it himself as, confusing. There was sometimes, he basically said, whether we're going to join the World War II, or sometimes he said, he's not going to join the World War II. There's all these different things. But what one of his famous quotes is, while it may seem inconsistent to others who are following me, but deep inside, he's very harmonious in seeking the truth, because he's always operating from who am I, where am I? Kshetre dharma kuru. In that assessing the field and the circumstances, he's always looking for the truth in that kshetra. And fundamentally, it's always anchored in the eternal dharma, which is like in a truth and non-violence in the general way. Right? And the beautiful quote that it says, in a gentle way, you can shake the world, in a very gentle way. And in fact, but he basically says, like, you have to be strong, and this path of truth is not for the cowards. It requires a lot of strength and the determination. It doesn't mean that when something adharma is going around you, you choose to remain silent. Then that's not really adhering to the truth. The thing here is, you have to be able to, the civil disobedience, which is like in a gentler way, you have to be able to stand up to the truth. because we realize that we are nothing but the divine manifestation. The people who are also doing the adharma is also the divine manifestation, and we are trying to embrace them in a loving way. But being steadfast to your principle of truth, and also by being resisting and fighting against the adharma around us. So I think these are some of the greatest examples. And in fact, Einstein says, this is like in the generations to come, it may well be, we'll scarce believe that such a man in a flesh ever existed, in a flesh and blood ever existed. And in fact, I truly believe that somebody who's been such steadfast in seeking truth and also conforming to non-violence in a gentler way. Any thoughts? Anybody want to add anything here? Okay. So from that Sanatana Dharma, which is all about truth as the core foundation, then let's look at the Svadharma. And again, this comes from Bhagavad-Gita, which is the shloka goes something like this. Shriyan Svadharmo Vigunaha Paradharma Swanustita Swadharme Nidanam Shreyaha Paradharmo Bhayavaha. This is Dharma of the self. What it basically says is, we all have our own innate skills. We all have our own Dharma that we're born with, our skills. Even if they are imperfect, even though you may not be perfect in reaching samyama, in whatever the skills and the Dharma that you're presented with, always try to go process that. Sometimes what happens is some other dharmas might look attractive, tempting, that we may want to, it's like, no, let's actually, I'm not perfect here. This doesn't seem to yield any good results or, any benefits. The other one looks like nice. And then you try to go embrace the paradharma. And what this basically says, like, always anchor and perfect and pursue excellence in your own swadharma and try to reach excellence in that, instead of being tempted by some paradharma. Because if you try to do the paradharma, you always will be anchored in, it's going to result in fear or abhinivesha, because you will never be secure in the paradharma. That's what it actually says. Like, for example, like, there is a monkey has a, inborn dharma. A monkey, if a monkey wants to be, try to be an elephant, or if an elephant tries to be a monkey, it never works. Or if you have a path of, I'm anchored in bhakti yoga, and if that is what is there, go to the peak and ekatattva abhyasa and achieve mastery and start in pursuing towards that inculcation of realizing that divinity from within, like a M.S. Subbulakshmi or Mirabai or Tulsidas and some of those things. Instead of it's like, maybe bhakti may not be it's a duality, and let me go prosecute something else. So there is something all of us are gifted with, the Isha has chosen all of us with some of its qualities want to be expressed, wanting to reach samyama through us, process them fully, and reach mastery in the skills that you're actually chosen. It doesn't mean that this is not against the growth mindset. It's about the dharma, making a way of life driven by the different motives. And this is captured in fact, this verse is played so beautifully in a perfect situation in the movie Swarnakamalam, where in the song Shiva Pujaku Chigurinchina Siri Siri Muva, where there is a beautiful exchange of points of views of Western Dharma and the Eastern Dharma. And both of them are right in their own way. And his point at that time in the end is, see, you are anchored in your Dharma. You're already blessed with so many of these. And try to reach excellence, go patakasthai in your own chosen swadharma, rather than try to go chase something for limited desires, for very limited desires. Because in this other path, in that movie, I don't know how many of you seen that movie, Swarnakamalam, you may not reach the mastery of excellence. Right? Always anchor in the in your own swadharma. So that's what it says, Shriram Svadharma Vigunaha, whatever you are actually blessed with as your swadharma. And that's what, even if it's imperfect, please go try to achieve samyama in that. And that's what Gandhiji was also he was actually encouraged by so many people in London and other places. They wanted him to, talk to him about, showed him, Bible and the Christianity and all the other religions. And it's like, please follow our dharma. This actually matches very close to your way of life. And then, Gandhiji very politely, in a gentler way, let me first understand my religion, my dharma, my roots, my culture, this thing, and then do it. And then the more he understood his roots of Sanathana Dharma and the Hinduism and the Advaita concept, basically it's like, my dharma is eternal. There is nothing wrong with it. In fact, it is more solid, the more deeper he understood it, and he felt more secure about his own being in our own skin. I think this is something that I see happening in our contemporary world, particularly the second generation, the third generation kids that are born here. They have a costume and they have a foundation or the roots, connected to Indian or Asian parents. And then when they are engaging, they are presented with different dharmas, and then they are they're not in insecurity of their own costume. And part of that is, Hinduism is also kind of, complex. There is sometimes bhakti, sometimes rituals, because we are not actually doing ekatattva abhyasa. Even Bhagavad Gita, we don't understand it in its entirety. And because of that, there's so much confusion. And that's where our opportunity is not to fight with it, but being gentler, understand the root cause and try to go deeper into it. And once we start connecting with that, I believe more and more kids and will be secure in our own culture. And that was what Vivekananda's struggle was. He basically felt that many of the Hindus itself, or Hindus or Sanatana Dharma followers, they were questioning, they were fighting against some of those things. And the part of the problem is many of them do not understand, but yet they will try to go fight for that. So it's about understand the essence of your own dharma before trying to either encourage paradharma. So that's kind of my reflection on it. Anything, Sunilji or Ramakanji or anybody wants to add anything here?
For me, right, there's another. Yeah, please. Yeah. Please go, sir. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, Ramakanji, please, you go ahead.
One thing which I think I heard from Osho, I guess, it's totally different from what all the other interpretations are. This is like, this is, Gita is so unlimited anyways. So he talks about saying, Swa is the innermost core, the self. And Para is nothing but the rest of it, the mind, the body and all. So that which is not me, that which is not self, is all Para. And the Swa is just the me and the self. So he says, going inward is the only thing, that is the only dharma we have. And getting into the mind or the outward is Para. That is and I really like that interpretation as well, saying there it's not about others, person's religion or my religion or my dharma, our group's dharma. No, he's saying literally that which connects all of us, ourself, right? So that is where you connect to, and that is our dharma. So anyway, back to you.
Yeah, I think that one is what we were originally saying, self-realization is the thing. But Bhagavad Gita also combines the Pravritti Dharma and Nivritti Dharma. What we were anchoring to what you just said, Ramakanji, if I just correctly, is about the Nivritti Dharma. It's about, the Swa Dharma is self-realization, right? Everything else doesn't matter. But at the same time, knowing the fact that we are here in that costume of the mind body, what is the right Pravritti Dharma? So Bhagavad Gita is the only scripture that combines this, both Nivritti Dharma and the Pravritti Dharma. In fact, I have the slide from you, which is going to talk about. I think when you talk about this Pravritti Dharma, what is the right way to conduct yourself in this world is also what this sloka shows light on, I believe.
I'm totally lost here.
Say it. Put it to words.
Okay, so even somebody who has no idea of what is dharma, what is adharma, won't we all, everyone has this like a compass in them to know innate that, oh, I did something wrong or I did something right. So if somebody is brought up with that, what is that dharma that they are following? What is that? Like, say they had no idea of what dharma is. True, they only know truth. They understand when they did something wrong to them, they understand, oh, hey, I did something wrong, and they did something right. And like, I understand for myself, like, yeah, what is dharma, and like, what is Hindu, like spiritual dharma and other things. But for somebody like, I'm an illiterate myself when it comes to this. How am I going to lead a child, my own child, into the path of dharma? I mean, of course, she knows what is right, what is wrong, and all those things, and be true to yourself and other things. How do I don't know how to express that. How do I say if they come and say, hey, I want to follow a different path of dharma because you didn't explain to me properly this, or I don't understand this, is quite confusing.
I think
that somebody else who's literate in their dharma and come and simplify them, like conversion happens and all those things, is because we ourselves, as you said, Hindus, we ourselves despise our own things or like don't understand enough to pass it on. So somebody who has like kids born here, right? Like we teach them, yes, some ritualistic things, some other things, but nothing concrete. Yes, they're extremely confused. How do you like teach them when I feel sometimes I myself am illiterate in this?
Yeah, I think
I'm learning myself. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that I resonate with. In fact, what I shared in the group, the reason why I'm trying to actually define kind of a little bit of a vision purpose for one of the missions that we are trying to go after is to help bring clarity, help bring right interpretation, right? Because particularly with the duality, with the bhakti movement, with the ritual centric, sometimes there is no basis for logic, and it may not actually, when we cannot explain the core and the essence. And that's when, until perhaps when the kids are like very small, they follow everything because the Prataksha Daiva is mom and dad. But once they start developing their own way of thinking, and when they get exposed to the more Pravritti dharmas in the school and other things, that's when they start questioning. And that's where not having the deeper meaning or the essence, it actually puts them in an extremely insecure position. And that's when they're neither secure in their costume and they're not either secure in their other things. And that's when they try to do unnatural things to be able to fit in someplace. So the thing, it behooves us to perhaps, number one, we understand this dharma and then understand the essence and try to interpret them in a more rational way. It doesn't mean that everything that is being written also need to be sacrosanct, because dharma is always dynamic, in every era, in every time, is that like, sometimes, what people do is they actually ask, one question. Like, I've watched many of these debates from Sadhguru when he goes in youth and spirituality or youth and India. There's somebody that actually gets onto one question, and then basically it's like, that's one question is enough to actually discount everything. It's like, why did Ram ask Sita to go into the fire? That one incident is enough to basically, it's like, neglect or negate everything about Ramayana, right? And for that, the time and interpretation to actually go deeper into the meaning. And then also it's like, in some cases it's like, okay, that was perhaps, the dharma. And there is actually an interpretation about that, because if you look at the dharmas, from what I understand is the dharmas is almost like a hierarchy. It's like there is eternal dharma, and then depending upon your kshetra, there is Raja Dharma, there is Kula Dharma, there is your family dharma, then your individual dharmas, and there is a whole hierarchy. And that is the reason even some of the more learned scholars like Bhishma, they literally had to follow their Raja Dharma, even knowing that they're actually fighting against the truth. Because at that time they felt that they are more anchored because of their vows or whatever. They basically said, like, we don't have a choice but to follow the Raja Dharma. So dharma is, that's what it comes in. When you engage in this pravritti world, it's not a binary 0 or 1. So that's where we literally would have to make some kind of a choices, kshetre dharma kuru. And I think one of the interpretations that I read in some of the scriptures is, you have to choose the dharma that represents the greater well-being of people. Because one of the definitions of the dharma that we covered in the last week, dharayet, prajah, because the dharma is that brings harmony to the people. But when we are the people, sometimes one people that follow in one dharma might conflict with other people, like the Mamaka and Pandavas. They're all trying to follow their own dharmas. But in that case, you basically represent the one that actually is going to give the greater harmony for more people. That's kind of choice. But if you actually start extending that, the greater sense of well-being to, be more inclusive of this Mother Earth, be inclusive of this universe. And that's when we actually all get back to the root of the tree, which is like the Sanathana Dharma. And that's where it comes down to ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya. But does everybody follow that? It's not there. So when everybody else is not anchored on that eternal dharma, then we have to go to this conditional dharma and choose the right context. I mean, which is what we are doing. As an example, I go work for Apple, you go work for a different company, and then we are actually trying to manage the best dharma for that kshetra that we are in. That's kind of how I interpret it.
Yeah, just to add, right, I know like the Arjuna versus Krishna, and because of his clarity and Arjuna's unclarity, I think we have that Arjuna-ness within us anyways, yeah, obviously. But for me, that's the reason when I reach out to 7 Habits, it gives me a very clear picture. I mean, it talks about principles. And what are principles? Principles are global, right? Principles are self-evident. Principles are not values. They are not practices. Principles are fairness, human dignity, potential, growth, patience, nurturance, encouragement. And I'm just reading out of the blog that I read. So it makes it a lot simpler for me as well. But again, no issues in that, in the sense, in spite of Bhagavad Gita being there or not being there. Like, for example, Vidura, I think I heard, he said, what is dharma is that which you do not want others to do to you, you do not do it to others. That is a simple dharma, just to understand it. So things like that too. It's always, there'll be a true north always. It's very, very simplified as well. But again, on a bigger scale, this can have wider understanding.
Exactly. I think the thing is, it's a beautiful game actually, because all the human beings, actually, there is not much problem with other species. It's only because the human beings where we have this ability to think and the memory, the chitta. The chitta is actually then it actually goes into all these other things, which is like, the 5 miseries, which is like, which is avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. And that's the reason why there was World War II. Because
it's very simple, right? The lion, when it needs to eat, it simply hunts and eats. That which it can digest, it will eat. Rest all it throws away. So it's very, very simple for them. Very simple. Like you said, the Ravana within us, the animal within us, the Ramakrishna Paramahamsa within us, that kind of a varied possibility that we have troubles us a lot. I think. Yep. With that, back to you, Sri.
Yeah, that's exactly what the sense is. It's only the humans, we have the greatest potential, and the greatest potential, but at the same time, we are the ones who are subjected to all these vrittis, and then that creates a conflict, that creates a division, and then that's when we need to anchor to something like a Bhagavad Gita to give us. I mean, as we talked about in the last Saturday, even Arjuna was also, it's like, this entire thing is about how can we be better prepared to handle all the situation in terms of us, right? And Bhagavan says, like, you just have to go fight. And Arjuna says, like, can't am I not better off actually go and, relinquish everything and meditate and realize myself? And then that's when, it goes through the entire Pravritti Dharma, Nivritti Dharma. So I'm going to quickly touch upon this. I don't want to spend too much time. There is another, in the Bhagavatam, in the first, in the enter part, they also talk about the Yuga Dharma of the eras, which is like a Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And what it actually says is, there are 4 pillars for Dharma, or 4 legs for Dharma. One is Satya, which is Satya, tapas, intense austerity, intense tapas to follow certain scriptures and the discipline, intense discipline, and doing a lot of sincere ability to do all the types of rituals and, based on the Vedas and other stuff. And then the third leg is the karuna, compassion, love, and also non-violence, ahimsa. It's all about being compassionate. And then the fourth is saucha, which is the cleanliness, which is what Dr. Sunil was referring to. That saucha is not within the body, but it's not just within the body. It's body, mind, and the surroundings, where it's all about keeping in the harmony. So these are the 4 dharma legs. In different yugas, there is one anchor. So, like, for example, in the sattva, I think, in the Treta Yoga, in the Ram Yoga, I think that time the humans are very much committed to doing intense austerity, tapas. So that is where, all the others are a little bit on the second thing, but that's where their core strength is. The dharma is very strong on that particular leg, and then all the others, kind of, take a little bit, thing. In the Kali Yuga, apparently we don't have that much discipline to follow tapas. We are not very loving people. We don't, anchor ourselves in karuna and compassion and love. And we also are not very cleanliness. So the only anchor that we have is to try to be Satya is the only anchor that we can actually hold on to. So if you can at least keep yourself in harmony, in the truth, that is what is going to help us, achieve peace in the Kali Yuga. And then the Dwapara Yuga, it's all about I think the charity, karuna. It's always about ahimsa and do more charity. And then Satya Yuga is all about saucha. I mean, there is an interesting dimension. I don't think we need to go deep into all these things. At the end of the day, we all need to follow all the ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parigraha. I think that's more eternal kind of a dharma. And then the last 2 verses that I would want to do is, these are very profound. Actually, these are very actionable. What he says, like, how is dharma and birth? What is the connection? How is dharma is actually right? And I think these 2 slokas that we are all very, very familiar with, they come in both Bhagavad Gita and Vishnu Sahasranama. And what Bhagavan says in chapter 4, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyudanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. So whenever the dharma is on the decline, glanir bhavati bharata, whenever the dharma is on the decline, glanir bhavati bharata, abhyudanam adharmasya, to upright the dharma, to restore the dharma, then I embody myself. Then I take the form to restore the dharma. This is tadatmanam srijamyaham. So wherever, the kshetre, it's all inclusive. This is like a game. In places where there is the dharma is on the decline, and that's when I take the form. I take the form. There is a literal interpretation. What people are always looking for this, that external manifestation of the Bhagwan, like in the Dashavatar, right? We're all waiting for that Kalki avatar. But there is this sloka was written with very deeper intention, knowing the Svadharama, that I take form. I means we are all that I representation, the self. So whenever, like, for example, if there is COVID as an, if you take this situation of the COVID, which is some kind of a, adharma, sets in. And when that thing happens, to restore the dharma, instead of complaining about it, we are not able to go, we are not able to do this, we are not able to engage in all this. Instead of being a complaining agent, what Bhagwan says is, I'm going to take the form in you, or I am taking the form in all of us as the change agent. We are the change agents to restore the dharma. It's not like, there will be the Shavatar, 11th avatar, 12th avatar, or any stuff. The divine is waiting for it to express itself. The Krishna is waiting to express itself through our costume so that we become Ishanga. In fact, Bhagavad Gita and Yoga says, Patanjali said, it is that the drashtu, the Purusha, is within it, that is the self. And Ishvara, the Ishvara and Purusha are one and the same. So what is, sloka, that how we can actually take it to action in our day-to-day life is, it is like wherever we see adharma, like a COVID or other things, we can then invoke tadatmanam srijamyaham. We can actually act like we can invoke the divinity within us to restore the dharma. In fact, all these are opportunities for us. And that's what we'll also talk about, the growth mindset in the Carol Dweck's, when we do the challenges as opportunities, not as crisis and this stuff. So this is literally what Bhagwan says. Any thoughts, comments?
All this time I thought God will come by himself too.
So it already came.
Yeah. No. No, but I didn't know this interpretation. That's good.
Right. And then the protecting of dharma, it is like, literally, this is what is going to happen. The nature also acts itself, and all of us are going to respond to this. The fact that we are all sitting here on a weekday after busy, weekdays, with this much level of seriousness to go deeper into this understanding and to see how we can actually realize the self and how we can see that in itself is seeing that, this is being played out. And the last sloka is Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkrutam dharma samstapanardaya sambhavami yuge yuge. And the last one, the yuge yuge, this is the only truth that happens in every era, and in fact in every situation, in every kshetre, in every kshetre, for the protection of the virtuous, for the protection of those people that are adhering to the right dharma, and for the elimination of the evil doers. In fact, it's not actually evil doers, it's actually the evil deeds, right? Because in everybody there is a self, for the destruction of the evil deeds, and in whatever the costume that they may present, and for establishing the dharma. And in fact, even for the Duryodhana and the Kauravas, the first and foremost thing is to actually try to convince them, try to, being a model of upeksha. There was compassion and, try to see the oneness, hey, you are the greatest king, you have the greatest valor, and why do you want to engage in? There was like the model of upeksha. If you were to go back to Maitri Karana Mudita Upeksha, that was done. But when that was not being done, just for restoring the dharma, the Bhagwan says, Arjuna, you take to the battlefield and do my duty. And he also says, like, whatever you're doing is already been done. It's already been done. You just go act. You just go act. That is how to do the protecting of the Dharma. So, and again, the reference of I, most of us, at the periphery, we interpret like, there is the Sri Krishna Bhagavan with Shankha Chakra Gada is going to manifest sometime. But the thing is that I refers to each one of us, to invoke that self, to invoke that Ishvara within us. We be the change agent to restore the Dharma. Sunilji, anything that you want to add? Sunilji, Ramakanchi?
No, it's just that's a beautiful poem. That's all. This is I'm having my aha moment with this. That's all. What words can we talk, right? It's totally amazing. That's all. Yeah.
Then the last one. This is a slide that I leverage from Ramakanchi. And what it literally says is the whole essence of Gita for those of us, and that's the beautiful, and that's the first scripture that actually covered this. How can we engage in the regular, seemingly mundane world and still seek spirituality, still be close to that self? Which is like, that's the one scripture, which is like, even if you're washing dishes, how can you see the divinity? How can you be spiritual? How can you see spirituality in everything that we do? How can we be engaged in the regular world while be spiritually anchored? How can you prosecute, or how can you pursue both Pravritti Dharma and Nivritti Dharma at the same time? So that inner peace and outer dynamism to reach excellence. So this is our ultimate goal on what we need to master, what we need to do samyama, which is that, and this is what Patanjali Yoga Sutra says, Abhyasa Vairagya Abhyam Tannirodha, which is constant practice on this Ashtanga Yoga, and engage in the world with a Vairagya Bhava, which is like, you are engaged in an exuberant way in everything that we do, but not attached to it, right? Not getting stuck to it is the right way to conduct yourself. I mean, this infographic is so wonderful, right? We all will be wearing a suit or whatever, the badges and the costume, that is appropriate while we are trying to do the right thing. But deep inside, we are that Yogeshwara Krishna, that inner peace. We are spiritual beings first. Humans are spiritual beings seeking for a human experience. We are spiritual beings seeking a human experience. We are not humans seeking a spiritual experience. I think that sentence is a beautiful thing, right? We are spiritual beings seeking a human experience. And most of us, we try to interpret that the way. We are human beings trying to get the spiritual experience.
Because I think we are
trained.
We are trained to be human.
And the experience also, right? See, in the sense, everybody would like to be authentic, but the problem here is, I think not even human beings. In one of my other slides, I come up with saying, are we human doings or human beings in the first place? So it takes a long time for us to really jump from the digital concept of a human doing that we are experiencing to a human being in the first place. And once we are a human being, the next level that we are saying is, hey, we are not human beings having spiritual experiences, but we are spiritual beings having human experiences.
Exactly. I mean, the duality is created is only to create that experience. That's it. Just to have a little bit of fun, actually. But otherwise, we're nothing but that real oneness. Right? So with that, that's kind of the essence of today's session. And any thoughts, or anybody want to add anything? That's the conclusion of the Dharma. And then as we cover next topics, we could also cover other topics in the Bhagavad Gita, like the Karma Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. And then Dhyana Yoga we already covered, and then we can look at a few other topics. Ramakanji, are you sharing something? Ramakanji, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm sorry. So what I was what I was saying is just to end. There was an amazing thing that you shared last week. That was the 4 things. Who am I? Where am I? And that concept. It's just that I wanted to share just an extended version of the same. I think you talked about the 4 things, right? And somebody also talked about these 5 things. So it says Gita talks about who am I, right? 5 major topics. Who am I? That is the Atma. Where am I in the Prakriti, the material world? What am I doing here, right? The karma that I am doing. And the oops, it jumped. Is it? Oh my goodness, how could it go to so last time? 1 second. And then it came to 4th one, right? How long am I here? Kala. And is there something beyond? That is there any concept of Ishvara? And this colored one I really liked because it said exactly the one that you're saying, Sriniji, about spiritual beings having human experience and humans having spiritual experiences. It says in conclusion, this is what Gita is teaching us. As souls living in the material world, we are performing activities within the jurisdiction of time. Though we actually belong in the spiritual world with God. Right? All these, it's very, very profound. It's a very huge aha moment for me. But anyway, with that, back to you, Sriniji.
Thank you. And thank you all for sharing this beautiful thing. And if I would want to walk away from my own thing is, number 1, the last 2 verses says that wherever there is a adharma in all these things, let's use them as an opportunities and let's invoke the I within. Let's invoke the Krishna Bhagavan and do our part. Number 1, we can actually do that 2 part. One is we being the role models to anchor in the eternal dharma, practicing what we believe in. That's number 1. And then also be the change agent for the people around us. But don't accept the silence and accept what is unjust, what is untruth, and then just look for a comfort zone. That is not the dharma that we subscribe to. So be the change agent and be the Krishna, be the Ishvara that we are. And knowing that we can only do that is when we start not getting mama with our body and the mind, because we get scared, abhinivesha and all those things come in because when we try to protect ourselves. But once you realize that this is just a vehicle to serve the divine, we are actually much stronger, deeper inside. That gives us the freedom and the security and the exuberance, and to be the Arjuna, to then go fight with no emotion, with a vairagya bhava, right? Because that is the right dharma to be done in those things. So we all can be that Arjunas, and that is the whole essence of Gita as the I part, and that is the last verse. Yatra Yogeshwar Krishno, Yatra Pardo Dhanurdharaha, Tatra Shri Vijaya Bhuti, Druvani Tirmatir Mama. So we're going to continue more sessions, and let's chant Om 3 times, and let's sing the final prayer. Take a deep breath. bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We wish everybody to be happy. We wish everybody to see only auspicious things. We wish everybody to be free of sorrow and illness, and let there be peace everywhere. These wonderful thoughts. Rub your palms. Generate the fire and love of knowledge. Cup our eyes. Give us the right vision. Divyam dadamati chakshu. And slowly and gently open your eyes with a bright smile. And thank you all. What you're seeing is, the house being still set up, but this is kind of my new, what I call is a center of excellence. Let me see. And hopefully we all get to meet here sometime. So for this coming Saturday, does anybody would want to, Ramakanji, do you want to cover some things?
No, we are. I'm good. I want to.
The thing is, I thought in the last class, you wanted to add a few other supplementary things or something that's complementary to the Dharma stuff. Do you want to do that? Or Sunilji, you have any things that you want to cover? So if any of you have any things that you would want to cover for Saturday, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll continue the Yoga Sutra and Bhagavad Gita kind of study. But I think, all of you had different topics that you wanted. I think Savitaji on the hook for 2 more stories, 2 more experiences, actually.
Yeah, 2 more stories there. And yeah, the other ones too, offline. Please.
Sorry, Ramakanji and I seem to have thought
huge
thought tag here.
yeah. So please go ahead.
I hear a lot of it should be like this, it should be like that. Like even I growing up also I heard. What I feel lacks is some techniques. Like I feel I don't know. That's where I feel things will become more concrete. This is too. I don't know. It becomes sometimes overhead transmission. But good examples, like like Vivekananda's you gave. I think it's kind of concrete things. Than be a good person, follow the dharma, like to a high level. Like when I came to this country, I asked my father. Apart from it says on my passport Hindu, how do I know I'm Hindu, right? Because when you come to a different country, I lived in one surrounding, everybody was Hindu, everybody was doing the same thing. When you come out of the country, you realize, how do I, not everybody is same around me. You know what I mean? So that's when the self-identity became a crisis at that point of time for me. But again, like I feel like a technique or more examples. Infographics are good. The slides are good. I don't know. I think stories is what we resonate into, and the techniques is what we can make it into more. How do I say? I can apply that in my life. I don't know. Think anybody else feels as different, at least. I don't know.
I think, actually, I completely agree with you. I think, there's one style that we're trying to do, which is more like doing it like a workshop. Because I think, it only gets reinforced when you apply that in the context of what you are going through, life experiences, right? And even like something like Vivekananda and this stuff, sometimes, you may or may not relate because the times are different and so on and so forth. But I think, there is a workshop style. I think what I thought, one way that I kind of apply to is the Swadhyaya comes in, whatever we do it, if we can actually apply it, take a moment before we are acting to the different kshetras, right? For example, in our life, situations, whenever we are actually trying to do something, you're having to have this, a little bit of conflict, this or that. And that's when, if you can actually go into, like, as an example, just Satya. Satya is like, something that you basically have to figure out what is the level of, tolerance, right? There is an extreme element of like somebody like, Gandhiji, who went all the way to Satyagraha as an example. And some of us may not have, some of those things. Then if you are to actually then process it, I think even all this theoretical, right? How do you let go of me, my, and mine? And when we have our own kids, but it's a process, actually. It's a process of the transformation. In other words, everything that I'm doing, if you were to just ask a question like, who are the beneficiaries of this action? And if you were to even take a journal of, how many things that you did every day, how many of them are helping me, my, mine, versus how many of them are actually being selfless? Just having even a small type of a kind of the catalog, and you can actually see the journey. And see the journey, and that actually inspires us to do more things. That means if you are at like 95.5, then making a conscious effort to increase the other that others, like add more actions that are in the benefit of others versus yours. And I think that becomes the root pivotal change. I think that the awareness of what's in it for you versus what's in it for the others. And the more things that we are doing it for the selfless action for the others in our day-to-day life, I think that's when we know we are actually making on the right direction. I think it actually, when we look at the Karma Yoga chapter, and that's when it actually brings even more crystal into all the things. I mean, the way I look at it, Savitaji, is like, even though they think very theoretical, I think in our Swadhyaya, like, when Patanjali said Yama principle, this is how you need to conduct yourself. Then when you do the Satya, we basically give examples of Vivekananda, Buddha, and Gandhi, and so on and so forth, Martin Luther King. But that's a tough ask to do it. And then we basically have to, but it's a process. Even Mahatma Gandhi also did not get there overnight, right? He had to purify himself. And then of course there is some samskara, but we can actually do it. And then asteya, non-stealing, we always have to, be conscious about that. And ahimsa, non-violence in our way of action. And there are these things. I think, if we keep this as my learning process, or I'm only speaking from my experience, right? When it becomes an intellectual exercise, Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, and Sakshatkaram, right? I think, we have to progress through the 4 levels of learning so that it just becomes part of our way of life. And for that, one is we can actually create exercises for ourselves. And one of the things that I'm actually thinking, particularly in this center kind of a modality, is perhaps creating workshops. In other words, bringing everybody's life situations. What are the things where they are kind of struggling with, the kind of choices, and then allowing everybody to narrate their own experience, and then coming up with what could be a better way of dealing with that situation. I think that's kind of what I'm thinking. And again, we're trying different formats. But I think the biggest thing is when we put every one of these things and try to map it to our life situation, I think that's when it actually clicks. I mean, I think so. That's when we actually make much more progress. That's all I have. If anybody has any other thoughts, please share with it. Otherwise, we'll adjourn and meet on Saturday.
Yeah, so nothing much. I think the question and answer is in the group, in the sense we also have this great sky kind of a knowledge as well. But again, on the other hand, we also have this body and the real application of it. So what Saitaji is asking, as well as what we have from Bhagavan, both are there. I think we together will walk through this journey. And it already says one of us is questioning something. So Bhagavan will definitely guide us through to make sure we create a applied Bhagavad Gita kind of a workbook, or so it is, they are available. We'll just reach out and work on it. So definitely we will get an answer.
Yeah, and then those applied workbooks are actually being written every day. by each one of us.
Exactly.
It's actually, there is no manual that's going to come in. It's like, the beautiful thing is that situations are, just look at it, just the COVID situation, how we are all dealing with this. This is like an applied workbook.
Absolutely.
Right. And then there are different people. There are people that are closer to the knowledge. Perhaps they act in a different way. People that are not closer to the knowledge, they act in a different way. So, but these are all the nice playgrounds and applied workbooks in real life situations that are being present to us. Almost all the kshetras are presented to us in different scales. And then we just have to experiment with it. Okay, can I play here? Can I play with this here? What are the cause and effect? And then depending upon our tapas, our level of tapas that we want to subscribe to. There are some people who actually, in fact, there are 3 types of living, right? There are, I think, 3 modes of living. One is principle-centric living or value-centric living, is money-centric living, and fame-centric living. So different people, money, and perhaps the other one is money can also be combined with pleasure-centric living or something like that, right? Depending upon what drives each one of us, that's what they will try to gravitate towards. But some of the people who are trying to seek on the spiritual journey, they are making a steadfast commitment. They are making a tapas towards a principle-centric living. And that path is not going to be easy. That means, that path is, one that is one with a lot of sacrifice, like, what is there was there in the Treta Yuga, which is like, where, even Ram was put through extreme set of sacrifices and tapas. So it's about our own ability to do the tapas that actually, and when you are anchored in the principle-centric living, it's not going to be an easy journey. You have to go through a lot of sacrifices, hardships and so on and so forth. But you means, I or all of us within us make a steadfast commitment to commit that and make a commitment towards that journey. I think that's all they did. I think, then there are some people who are like, no matter what it is, I'm trying to optimize for money. And some people are going for fame. Some people are going for pleasure. But it's about what we want to anchor our way of life to be, principle centered. Okay. So with that, let's conclude today's session and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you for this satsang as always, and we'll meet again on Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.